What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for being here today. Day one of training camp is officially in the books, and I am going to review literally everything that I can possibly think of that I had the opportunity to witness and view at training camp from day one. So we'll take a deep dive now. It was only about a 90-minute practice, a little bit less. Part of that took place inside the Don Hutson Center, just with the team. Even the media wasn't privy to see that. A lot of that's just like stretching and warming up and stuff. But overall, I would say we got to see about 70 minutes of practice. But everything that I saw, good, bad, ugly, and different, I'm going to give to you. And just as a heads up, if you are new here, if you are not familiar with the Pack a Day podcast or with myself, I am going to give you everything that I saw. I am going to try the best that I possibly can to be your eyes and your ears out there, because obviously the majority of you are not able to be at practice every day. I am literally just trying to give you what I saw. I'll add in my own commentary and analysis as needed and as necessary as we sort of go through all of this. But my biggest thing is to try to get you the information and do with it what you will. That's always what I try to do more often than not. But again, my biggest goal is to try to give you as much information as possible so that you guys can nerd out on it and do with it what you will. Note, of course, that this was not a padded practice. First practice, pretty light overall, though it did have a lot of team activities, which of course makes it a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable to cover as well. So let's go over the logistics first before we get into all the things that actually happened at practice. First of all, Jeff Cotton was released, and that was, of course, to make room for Cody Crest. He will take over Jeff Cotton's number 82. I'm bummed for Cotton because I'm bummed at for any player this time of year that ends up losing out on an opportunity, probably in large part due to injury. Cotton had whatever injury. He got injured during some of OTAs and mini camps as well and missed some time. And I just hate that for the player. And he was a player that, like I mentioned, in like the one practice that we got to see in OTAs and mini camps, made a couple plays, and I was impressed with his speed. So when you just see a player that has some injury stuff and then ultimately has to get released, I'm just bummed that they miss out on that opportunity. But overall, he ends up released, and Cody Crest takes his spot at wide receiver. Meanwhile, Cameron McDonald gets taken off the non-football injury list, so he was able to practice on day one of training camp, which was great news. The only players not practicing, and I think overall, this is really worth celebrating if you're a Packer fan, Tarvarius Moore, Caleb Jones, Tariq Carpenter, Grant Dubose, Rashawn Gary, and Eric Stokes. Now, we've talked about Stokes and Gary. There is hope and optimism that they are going to be back this summer and ready to practice and maybe not have to go onto the PUP list to start the season. But overall, we knew that they were not going to be practicing to start training camp. So that was expected. And then again, Tarvarius Moore, Caleb Jones, Tariq Carpenter, Grant Dubose, the only other four. The better news here, Tarvarius Moore, Caleb Jones, and Tariq Carpenter all were illness related per the Packers. So not even injuries, more illness, and hopefully they should be back sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, it sounds like Grant Dubose has a back injury, and it sounded like it hopefully wasn't going to be anything super long term. He was off to the side working with trainers during the course of practice. Usually if it's a more severe type injury, a lot of times those guys work in the Hutson Center, and then the next step is practicing outside with trainers and then slowly reintegrating yourself back. But hopefully Dubose is back sooner rather than later. You never want to see a rookie miss those early snaps. He missed all of OTAs, all of mini camps, etc. So hopefully he can get back sooner rather than later. But the only three players that are injured right now, at least going into day one of camp, Dubose, Gary, and Stokes, with Carpenter, Jones, and Moore all having illness-related issues, I guess. Meanwhile, the other logistic piece here is that I had the opportunity pre-practice to ask Matt LaFleur about David Bakhtiari and sort of his cadence and schedule as a veteran who's had some injury issues in the past. And he basically said that, yes, David is going to have a very altered schedule in, comparison to the rest of his teammates. Sounded like he probably won't do, at least in some capacity, it wasn't going to be out there probably on, I think he mentioned today or like Thursday. And then Friday was going to be more of a walkthrough practice, and then, kind of see from there how Bakhtiari is responding to things. But the big takeaway from the press conference prior to practice was that, basically Bakhtiari is going to have some sort of altered practice. And that's just to get Bakhtiari ready for the season and give him the best opportunity to play as many games as possible through the course of the season. He is obviously a massively important piece to this team and what they're going to be able to achieve on the field this year. So to put him in the best position possible to be ready, and he doesn't need very many practice reps, right? Anything that he gets is a bonus. I can literally promise you right now, and I'm not saying he would be as good as he would be if he got practice reps, but if you just wrapped David Bakhtiari in bubble wrap and said, hey, you can't practice until week 1, I guarantee you he would be more than fine and ready to go week 1 and ready to block his butt off, through the course of that game. So it'll be great that he's out there for as much as he could, possibly can be, but he will have some altered schedule in some capacity. All right, that does it for logistics. Let's go right into practice. From a starting standpoint, here was your starting defense on day 1 of training camp. Devonte Wyatt, Kenny Clark, and TJ Slaton along the defensive line, who I thought actually had a really nice day. Kenny Clark was in the middle of that group, with Slaton to the right, Wyatt to the left. We'll see how that goes throughout the course of camp. I'm sure Clark is going to see some time at end as well. I'm sure Slaton is going to see some time at nose tackle, but it was Wyatt, Clark, and Slaton. Preston Smith, and then Justin Hollins was on the other side at the other edge rusher. It was not Enigbare. It was not Lucas Van Ness. Of course, Gary's out with injury, but it was Justin Hollins. That's not new. OTAs and mini camps, it was Hollins on the opposite side as well. Different coaches have different ways of doing things. We have seen Luke Musgrave get time with the, as basically tight end 1 on offense, but it's possible on the defensive side of the ball, they're going with the veterans. In that case, Justin Hollins is the veteran of that group, above, Brenton Cox, above Kingsley Enigbare, and of course, above Lucas Van Ness. So they're not going to just hand that apparently to Van Ness or even Enigbare at this point. Those guys are going to have to earn the spot. And so far, it is Justin Hollins that is opposite Preston Smith. Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell at inside linebacker, Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas as the outside corners, Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage were your starting safeties, and then when they went with nickel, it was Keyshawn Nixon in the slot with Devonte Wyatt coming off the field in that specific situation. On the offensive side of the ball, they rotated players a ton with the ones, but Jordan Love obviously at quarterback, Aaron Jones at running back, Josiah DeGuara and Luke Musgrave at tight end. They used a lot of 2 tight end sets through the course of the day. Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson at wide receiver, Bakhtiari at left tackle, although Yosh Nijman did rotate in with him at left tackle just to not give Bakhtiari that full amount of reps and kind of give his body a little bit of rest, especially on day 1. Elton Jenkins at left guard, Josh Myers at center, John Runyon Jr. at right guard, and then Zach Tom at right tackle. So those were your starters for the day. Now, the biggest player, of course, that we're all going to be dissecting in a million different ways and wanting to know exactly how he performs is Jordan Love. I thought Jordan Love had a up and down day overall. I will note, and this was noted by numerous others in the media as well, that it was a very windy day at practice, especially on the side of the field that they were throwing into. He was throwing into the wind, and there's no question about it that absolutely affected some of his deep ball passing, which we're going to go over in just a moment. Is that an excuse? No. Did Jordan Love in his post-practice interviews use that as an excuse? No. He knows that he's got to rip the ball through that and he's got to find a way to complete those passes. But I do want to note very distinctly that there were some pretty I wouldn't say like insanely heavy winds, but it definitely affected the trajectory of the ball on a couple different occasions. And this is day 1 of practice as well. And some of that timing with wide receivers, especially in some windy conditions, that stuff does take a little bit of time to get down. So not a full accident forgiveness for Jordan on some of those throws that we're going to go over, but I do think it's worth noting in some capacity nonetheless. And I will say, and I said this on my Quick Hits episode, I didn't think this was a bad day from Jordan. There were no interceptions. There was maybe one play that could have been like an interception-worthy play that we'll talk about, but even that I think was more of a contested catch situation at best or at worst. I didn't think there were any awful throws, and the more and more that I thought about this, and I did not go over this in my Quick Hits episode, I thought the big positive for Jordan was that he knew where to go with the ball. Nothing seemed overwhelming. No matter what the defense threw at him, he had an answer for it. And that is going to be something that is insanely important for Jordan this season. And the more and more I sort of marinated on what I saw at practice today, that was one of my really big takeaways, because teams are going to blitz him. They're going to show him cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, man-to-man zone coverage, off man, press man, off zone. Like, they're going to show him everything. And I thought, Joe Barry and the defense did a good job of mixing things up and throwing some different things at the number one offense, including Jordan Love. And I thought throughout the course of the day, he knew where to go with the football. And why I say that, there were differing reports. I think Domovsky and I think it was Schneidman had him at 7 for 14 on the day. I think it was Huber had him at 7 for 15 on the day. Either way, I think Paul Brettel had him at 7 for 14 as well. We'll go 7 for 14 is what we'll use for this, since I think 3 of the 4 had 7 to 14 in the statistics for the day. Not that they ultimately matter, but those 7 incompletions, there were 4 that I'm going to talk about in more detail. There was one clear Christian Watson drop. There was another that he targeted Christian Watson over the middle, maybe a little high, maybe. Jair had super tight coverage on the play, and it was just it ended up being a contested catch, kind of a bobble. I thought Watson could have done a little bit better. I thought Love maybe could have put it on him a little bit better, and just Jair's freaking Jair, right? But that was going to the right. I didn't mind his decision on that play to throw to Watson. And then there was another play where he threw to Jaden Reed, where Keyshawn Nixon made a gorgeous diving pass breakup on the play to bat away the ball. But on all 7 of the incompletions, the 4 that we're going to talk about, the 4 misses, were all good reads, and he threw to the right spot on the play. The 2 Watson drops, I had no issue where he went with the ball on those plays. The diving pass breakup by Keyshawn Nixon, like, Reed was there. He made a good throw to Reed, and just Keyshawn Nixon made a better play. So overall, and then the other ones were 7 completions, and I have obviously no issues with those either. There was one check down, I think, to Dillon, another check down kind of to DeGuara, if I remember correctly. But overall, scanned the field, read it, threw downfield when there were opportunities, threw intermediate when there were opportunities, and then checked it down when he needed to, even scrambled on a play and picked up some nice yardage. So I thought overall, defense threw different things at him, and he sort of had answers for everything. Now, with that needs to come those completions, right? And that was an issue on the day. Before we get there, I want to go over some of my other just quick takeaways and positives. I thought he had total command of the offense, made checks at the line of scrimmage, made one nice check. Looked like he maybe checked out of a pass into a run play, and it was a really nice run play to the right side. His hard count was good. He was able to get the defense to jump off sides on one specific play. I thought his play action game was good. Kept his eye, or it was, excuse me, I was going to say kept his eyes downfield when navigating the pocket, but we'll get to that next. But when he had the play action, I thought really hitting his landmarks, using the play action, getting turned around, placing his back foot down, and then just ripping the ball specifically to Romeo Doubs usually on those plays. Navigating the pocket and navigating pressure, keeping his eyes downfield, knowing where to go inside the pocket, stepping up when need to, rolling out when need to, but still keeping his eyes downfield and looking for those plays down the field. I thought he hit his drops really well under center and hitting some of those slants to Romeo Doubs. I thought the play to Samori Toure at the end of practice was his best throw of the day. On that specific play, it was a spread formation. I don't know if they were all 5 wides. I didn't get to check who was out on the field, but there were 5 players spread out wide. And on this specific play, good pressure by the defense. He navigated the pocket perfectly. And I'll say this once again, this was not just red jersey navigating the pocket and like, oh yeah, you can't really touch the guy. No, he navigated it perfectly, got upfield and then recognized that there was a tight window and he dropped his arm angle, threw a little bit sidearm, hit Samori Toure in stride, would have probably been a 20-plus yard pickup on the play. I thought that was a gorgeous play. And nothing overwhelmed him. And like I said, defense threw multiple things at him, and he sort of had answers for everything. So I think those were some real positives to take away from Jordan Love on the day. Now, the negatives, he had 4 deep balls that he had opportunities to maybe make some explosive plays, and all 4 were poorly thrown, I guess is probably the easiest way to put it. And again, I'll say this, not an excuse, but a small caveat, windy conditions certainly affected this. The first one, Luke Musgrave, beats Corey Ballentine one-on-one off the line of scrimmage, gains separation down the field. Love has him, should be a big completion, and Love lofted it up a little bit too much. Probably got caught in the wind a little bit. Wind knocked it back. Corey Ballentine, to his credit, was able to get back in the play, broke up the play. I thought Luke Musgrave could have done a better job coming back to the football. At the end of the day, probably should have been a big completion down the field. Hung up a little bit too much. Musgrave probably could have made a better play, but ultimately it falls incomplete. Ends up a win for the defense rather than a big completion for the offense. That's one I'm sure Jordan would like to have back. Another play, deep corner out to Christian Watson on the left side. Had him open. Could have been another, I would say, I don't know, maybe 18 to 23 yard play, somewhere in there. Ball flowed, flies too far to the left and incomplete. And Watson didn't have an opportunity even to make a play on the ball on that specific one. So, and a little bit of an errant throw there. I'm not sure what the pressure was on the play. I'm not sure if he was rolling out. I didn't see that part of it. Part of this, guys, is there's like 85 guys practicing and you're trying to view different things. Like at a certain part of practice, I was trying to watch Lucas Van Ness, and then, you kind of see what happened at the end of the play. On this particular play, I didn't see what developed because I was watching sort of, I think I might have actually been watching Van Ness on that play, but whatever it was, I was able to see Love make the throw at the end and then got my eyes downfield and saw that Watson was open and the ball fluttered to the left, and I don't even say flutter, like he threw a fine ball, but like it just ended up incomplete, too far to the left. So probably a ball that he would like to have back there. There's another play where pressure came. I think it was Kenny Clark on the play. He avoided pressure from Kenny Clark, did a great job, navigated the pocket again, kept his eyes downfield, rolled to the right, found Samori Toure, did everything right up until this point, fires for Toure. And it's possible that he just, like, based on how fast Toure was running and like what he needed to do on the play, that's all he could have done. But I thought there was an opportunity to maybe lead Toure just a little bit less and really give Toure the opportunity to get his feet in bounds. He completes the pass to Toure, but unfortunately it was not well out of bounds, but clearly out of bounds. I think both feet were out of bounds. I don't think Toure even got 1 foot in, and it's another play that he did everything right up until that point. If he could just make that completion at the end to Toure, it ends up being a pretty big play, and instead it ends up being another incompletion. And then the last one, and again, all of these are great reads, and where he should have gone with the ball just needs to be a little bit more accurate with it. And the final one, one-on-one play, Romeo Doubs versus Jaire Alexander. I think Romeo maybe had like a quarter of a step at best, but remember, Jaire can catch up with just about anyone. And the ball, once again, hung up a little bit, underthrown. Jaire gets his head turned, knocks the ball away. That's one where, with it being underthrown, if Jaire would have maybe turned around a little bit sooner, he might have had an opportunity to make maybe an interception. But I think this was always a little bit more of probably an incomplete pass, and Jaire did a nice job getting his head turned and ultimately batting it away. But that's a play where he could have legitimately given Romeo Doubs an opportunity, probably at like a 50-50 ball. And it's probably batted away maybe by Jaire anyway, but instead of a 50-50 ball that Romeo has the opportunity to come down with, it ends up just being an easy play for Jaire to make in the end. That's just another throw that he'd like to have back. So the Musgrave throw, the Watson throw, the Toure throw, and the Doubs throw, all down the field, all could have been better and given his players better opportunities to come down with those passes. Instead, 4 incompletions. Is it the worst thing in the world? No. Is it something that he can learn from? Yes. Does it give me any cause for concern? No. Does he want all 4 of those throws back? Probably, right? So that's just the sort of day that it was. And I think there's still a lot of positives to take away from Jordan's day. But the big thing and sort of the thing that kept coming back was some of that deep ball accuracy in the wind. Again, not just the wind, but you're working with like Luke Musgrave for his first training camp practice, right? You're working with, and yes, Doubs and Toure and Watson are in their second year, but you're starting to get, you're trying to get the rhythm down with a lot of those guys. And on deep balls, it takes a little bit more time to develop. So don't read too much into it. First day of practice, pads aren't even on yet, but that's something that Jordan definitely would have, probably liked to have back and could have done a little bit better on his first day as the, new QB1 and, the first day of the Jordan Love era, for lack of a better term. One last note on Jordan Love. I did think they did a lot of playing him under center. So remember, Aaron, really didn't like to do a lot under center, didn't like turning his back to the defense. He really wanted to see everything that was developing at all times. He kind of gave in and ran some of it, but I think sort of begrudgingly at times. And then the question was going to become, well, Jordan Love played a ton of shotgun in college. Was he going to, he played a good chunk of the day under center, utilize some play action, and I think that's going to be a pretty big piece of this Matt LaFleur offense with Jordan Love at quarterback. All right, 3 players of the day. You guys know me. You know I love the back of the roster guys, and I love calling a player out who made a big play who maybe you didn't hear of or you don't talk, doesn't get talked about as much. This was a day for 3 big time players, and I thought Jaire Alexander, Kenny Clark, and Devondre Campbell were my 3 biggest players of the day. I don't have a under the radar player who had a great day or anything like that. It was Alexander, Clark, and Campbell. Alexander was sticky in coverage all day. Give him credit for the Christian Watson one that was maybe a little bit high for Watson, but Jaire was right there, sticky coverage, and really made that super difficult for Watson. Even if he, even if he would have come down with it, it would have been a short completion because Alexander was right there, and Alexander made everything contested. And then he had the pass breakup against Romeo Doubs on the deep ball. He was all over the place, breaking up passes and just super sticky in coverage. Everything that you would expect out of Jaire Alexander on day 1 of training camp. I love watching him practice. He takes everything so seriously, constantly working on his craft. It's going to be so good for Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson to get to work across from him, every day at practice, because it's going to make everyone better in that situation. Kenny Clark, from the opening, I think play number 1, he sliced through the line and was in the backfield immediately. And that was a constant theme throughout the course of the day. He was in the backfield and, pressuring Jordan Love on pass plays. He was making stops and run plays. He was not the offensive line were not getting any movement on him whatsoever. He looked fantastic on the day. I might even put him as number 1 on my list, maybe just slightly ahead of Jaire, but you could label them either 1 or 2. And then Devondre Campbell. Campbell himself mentioned that last year had some injury issues, kind of got healthy and started to play well, and then had some injury issues again and just never felt like himself in 2022. I thought he looked like 2021 Devondre Campbell on day 1 of practice. Caveat again, no pads. It's going to take some, we'll see, right? But day 1, he was flying all over the place. He was aggressive in run defense. I thought he had a couple of really nice, run stops, if you will, but plugged the lane, plugged the alley, plugged the gap, whatever you want to call it. But also got sideline to sideline, was good in coverage. I think maybe a couple of the completions, maybe the one to DeGuara and Dillon, he was right there, just immediately there to make the stop on short completions. I thought he was all over the place, and he looked very, very spry, which is a huge thing for Devondre. And just if he can play with pace and speed and he's feeling himself, that's going to be a huge key for this defense. And love to see those 3 specific players, Jaire, Kenny, and Devondre, having huge days from day 1 at training camp. Plays of the day, I mentioned the one earlier from Jordan Love to Samori Toure in the very last play of practice. Great job navigating the pocket by Jordan, dropping the arm angle. Samori came open twice, and I thought he had a nice day as well. He had the one deep crosser that Love just missed him a little bit late, and it ended up out of bounds. But on the last play, came open again against Keyshawn Nixon, made a big play. Like I said, probably would have been a 20-plus yard play. So great sign for Toure. Right now, day one only, I would say Samori has a pretty decent step ahead of Jayden Reed as that number 3 wide receiver. And then Dontavian Wicks with my other play of the day. He had a fantastic block on Rudy Ford. Let me start with Wicks, who kind of was in that Allen Lazard sort of kind of H-back role where he kind of motions in and it was kind of a step behind the offensive line. And then he had to block Rudy Ford, who's a good run defender, very physical, and open up that alley for the running back. I didn't see which running back it was, but ended up being a big gain up the field. And it was in large part because of a block by Dontavian Wicks. And yes, it would have been maybe cooler for Wicks and maybe for us talking about it if it was a 70-yard completion down the field. But it is not every day that you see a rookie on day 1 of training camp make an impact block on a veteran safety. And if that's something that Dontavian Wicks can do with any sort of consistent basis or regularity, he's going to find the field a lot for Matt LaFleur. So I love that block, and it was one of my favorite plays of the day from him. Unfortunately, on a play where Alex Magoo took a shot over the middle, There was kind of a 50-50 ball with Innis Gaines and Dontavian Wicks sort of coming to that 50-50 ball at the same point. Wasn't really a hit from Gaines. They were both going from the ball, but there was definitely a bit of a collision there. I don't know if that's what ultimately, hurt Dontavian Wicks or what happened there. But a couple minutes later, he ends up making his way into the Don Hutson Center with a trainer. The trainer came back. I never saw Wicks return to practice. It's possible that he did. There's a lot of dudes out there, but I never saw him return to practice, and hopefully he's okay and no major issue or injury, and he's back at practice on Thursday. But that is one thing to note, and the only player that I saw personally drop out of practice in any capacity. All right, let's do some quick hitters through the remainder of practice, some things I wanted to go over. Jonathan Garvin moves from edge rusher to the defensive line. This makes some sense. You've got Rashawn Gary, you've got Preston Smith, you've got Justin Hollins, you've got Lucas Van Ness, you've got Kingsley Enagbare, you've got Brenton Cox. Those are 6 guys right there that probably have better odds of making the 53 than Jonathan Garvin. And then you've got Ladarius Hamilton, who's probably on the exact same level as Jonathan Garvin. So to try to make it as like a 4th or 5th edge rusher, the numbers just don't do Jonathan Garvin any favors. Meanwhile, along the defensive line, you've got your 3 guys that are going to play a lot. Got a rookie in Colby Wooden who's not going anywhere. Rookie in Carl Brooks is probably not going anywhere. But then after that, and especially if there's any injury along the defensive line, like the depth starts getting pretty thin. You've got Jonathan Ford, you've got Chris Slayton, but there's definitely more opportunity along the defensive line than there is at edge. So we'll see if Jonathan Garvin can make the most of that, and just to see, who knows what he can do at that type of spot. But it's probably now or never for Garvin. It's never a great sign if the team's trying to switch you to see if maybe they can find a spot for you. But I do think that the numbers and the math work out a little bit better for Garvin at defensive line than they do at edge. But we'll see what that what transpires there and what comes to fruition out of that position change. Did think Christian Watson had a little bit of a tough day. He had the easy drop in the flat. Then he had that sort of bobble contest with Jair, maybe a little bit high play as well. And really nothing else descript or noteworthy on the day. So listen, drops for Watson were a huge issue in training camp and mini camp and OTAs last year. What do we see on the very first play of offense? A drop, against the Vikings from Watson, in week 1 last year that should have been in 80-yard touchdown or whatever. So that's something that continues to plague him. It plagued him a little bit in college. Am I concerned about it? No, but you didn't want to see that either, especially on day 1 of practice. But he'll get through it. He'll work on his concentration, and like I said, nothing I'm concerned about. Thought Zach Tom had a really nice day. He played every snap at right tackle. There was, with the ones, there was no rotating with Yosh Nijman on the day. So we'll see if that changes. And on day 2, if Yosh is at right tackle or what they do there. Also, Zach Tom got some snaps at center with the 3rd team. So they're giving him still some different looks with some different units to try to get him as many reps as possible. But he definitely got all the reps with the ones at right tackle. And like I said, I thought he played very well on the day, or practiced very well. As far as Lucas Van Ness, number 1 overall pick for Green Bay, not number 1 overall in the draft, but first pick for Green Bay. He had one of those plays, and this is something I noted before he was even drafted by Green Bay in his scouting report. He has that Clay Matthews-esque ability to scream down the line. Like teams would try to just leave Clay Matthews unblocked and do those bootleg plays and see if he would stay home against the quarterback, and he would, but then scream down the line and still make the play against the running back. Lucas Van Ness had one of those plays, and it was something he did in college a ton. He has that same Clay Matthews innate ability to make those plays. He read the play, if it was going to be a bootleg or not, recognized it wasn't, screamed down the line, made a stop in the run game. I thought his run defense on the whole for the day was really, really good. He was with the 2nd team along with, JJ Kingsley Enagbare at edge rusher on the outside. Like I said, run defense was great, and he did have a couple pass rush plays against Luke Tenuta where I thought Tenuta got the best of him, but that's going to happen through the course of the day. And a nice day for Tenuta, by the way, as well, who got brought up by Brian Gutekunst unprompted in his press conference on Tuesday. So we'll see what that means for Tenuta moving forward. But I thought overall, Van Ness for day 1 had a nice day. We'll see what happens when the pads come on. Innis Gaines continued to get work in the slot. Remember, end of last year against the Vikings and Lions, the last 2 weeks of the season, he legitimately got snaps in the slot in both of those days. I think this is more of like what Innis Gaines can do for you. I mentioned earlier, I had the pass breakup over the middle against Dontavian Wicks on the play that Wicks probably got hurt. But it was a nice play by Innis Gaines. And he's a good special teams player. He's got safety depth. He can play in the slot. Like, the more you can do for if you're in a Scanes, the better opportunity is, that you can be active, like A, make the 53 potentially, and then B, be active on game days. Because if you can play teams, be a backup safety and be a backup slot, it gives you more versatility, right? So he'll be a name to keep an eye on moving forward. Anders Carlson, 5 for 6 on the day, kicking field goals, was wide left from 44, but made all of his other kicks. So not a bad start. It's such a weird thing with like a kicker, right? You got 6 snaps on the day, and like 5 out of 6 is fine. It's like not you want to be like 90% or above kicking, obviously, but overall, I think for day one for a rookie kicker, you'll take 5 for 6 with wide left from 44 on a day that had some windy conditions. Keyshawn Nixon, I mentioned earlier, had the diving pass breakup against Jaden Reed. That was a really nice play for him. He was on my list of players who had a really great day and was going to probably make my top player list until he looked to be the one in coverage on Samori Toure on the very last play of the game, which ended up in, like I said, like a 20-plus yard completion. But outside of that, Nixon had a very nice day. Devonte Wyatt had a nice pressuring team drills. And as I mentioned earlier, the front three I thought was very, very stout with Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, and Devonte Wyatt just not giving much ground, especially in the run game. Offense had a really tough time running all day. I think they had one maybe really nice run, and everything else was just really tough sledding. Luke Musgrave, we mentioned the separation, and he's going to be a weapon as a pass catcher. His blocking struggled on the day, specifically on one snap against Preston Smith. Now, rookie tight end versus, veteran edge rusher like Preston Smith, it's probably not going to end well more often than not, but he didn't really stand much of a chance, and Preston Smith probably would have had a sack on the play against Jordan Love, but it was definitely one of those things where you can tell Musgrave still has a lot of work to do as a blocker. Second team offensive line from left to right, Yosh Nijman at left tackle, Sean Ryan at left guard, Jake Hansen at center, Royce Newman at right guard, and Rasheed Walker at right tackle. Remember, Caleb Jones not practicing on the day. Danny Etling was quarterback 2, Sean Clifford was QB3, Alex Magoo was QB4. Not really anything of note from Etling. Sean Clifford had one really nice play where he stepped up in the pocket, sort of ducked under in like a kind of, Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield sort of way. And then did a nice job of getting, keeping his eyes downfield, finding Bo Melton over the middle of the field. So Sean Clifford to Bo Melton, nice play there. And I thought Alex Magoo, a little bit of a tough day, threw kind of a couple murder balls over the middle that probably would have got his receivers killed in an actual game, and like actually kind of got Dontavian Wicks maybe hurt on one play. So thought he struggled, but remember, this is his first day with the team, and he's still getting to know the playbook. So it's going to take some time for Alex Magoo. Lou Nichols had a drop in individual drills. His hands were an issue in OTAs and minicamps. He was not a big-time pass catcher in college, so that's going to be something that he has to continue to work on. And overall for the day, it looked like the defense won the day just from a common sense and like if anyone was watching it standpoint. But certainly Matt LaFleur seemed to agree, as the offense was the one doing push-ups at the end of the day as the defense watched on. And it certainly seemed like they awarded the defense the day overall. So offense does push-ups, defense does not have to. All right, couple other quick notes, not practice related. If you didn't know or didn't hear, Aaron Rodgers apparently took a pretty massive pay cut to play for the Jets. Now, a couple things. A, this was probably agreed upon in some capacity as the Jets were talking to Aaron to potentially play this season, and knowing what they were going to have to give up for him in order to get him. There was probably some negotiations ahead of time of saying like, hey, you want to be a Jet, we're going to have to work on this contract, because it was a massive contract. So I know that some people might be a little bit upset, and maybe Aaron taking less money than he maybe would have with Green Bay. I don't know. Who knows, right? I will say, A, this is probably negotiated ahead of time. B, Aaron did have times, especially early in his career, where he did take less money than he could have gotten. I'm not saying he took did the Tom Brady route or even the Patrick Mahomes route where he took ridiculously less money, but he didn't take top dollar on the open market at times, especially in I think second and third contracts in Green Bay. So he didn't always max Green Bay out. This last contract was certainly a little bit more maxing out. And then to see him take less money with the Jets, I don't know. You can make an argument from an optics standpoint. Make of it what you will. Ultimately, I don't care. The number that I care about for Aaron Rodgers, 65%. He plays 65%. Green Bay gets the first round pick. That's the only Aaron Rodgers number that I care about in 2023. Meanwhile, Cool part of Aaron Rodgers texted Jordan Love the night before practice, basically said, be yourself, have fun, enjoy it. Gave him some words of encouragement before his first practice. Thought that was pretty cool from number 12. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you as always for joining me. I enjoyed practice so much on day one that I'm going to do it again today on Thursday. I can't wait to have all the updates and news for you, so make sure to check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.